Yes, we come to, or rather, we continue with the same. We ended on the principles of classical conditioning, and it was on spontaneous recovery. So, spontaneous recovery, spontaneous, it means sudden. So, it can be said sudden recovery, the return of the previous extinct conditioned response. We said extinction, which is our second principle. We said if the owner of the dog stopped giving, or rather associating the dog with such a theory, the theory, or rather the dog, can stop responding to the what, to the response, or rather it will go into extinction. But we are also saying to say spontaneous recovery, which is a sudden recovery. We are saying the dog, if you start the theory again, you start, for example, ringing the bell, the dog will respond spontaneously. It will start responding because it has already been acquired previously. Are we together? Okay, let me explain once more. We are saying extinction, it is coming to an end. I gave an example to say, for example, you stop giving the dog food and the bell, to ring the bell. This conditioned response will come to an extinction. It will stop. But at a later stage, maybe after 2 months, you will start again ringing. Remember the first principle, which is acquisition. The dog already acquired the principle, which means spontaneously it can also do what? Recover the association or the event. So here, spontaneous recovery, we are saying the return of the previous extinct conditioned response. It can spontaneously recover. If you ring the bell, it can spontaneously recover to say, oh, I've heard about that bell. And it will, because it acquired already, it will spontaneously recover. Are we together? Okay. We are going to the fourth principle, which is stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization occurs when a conditioned response that has been associated with a particular stimulus is generalized to other stimulus. For instance, a different bell. So stimulus generalization is, for example, I'll give an example. I like giving examples. For example, the stimulus, which was the bell. The bell has been generalized by changing its sound. By changing its sound, what will happen? The dog will stop responding to the stimulus because it has already acquired, which is the first principle of conditioning, which is acquisition. It has already acquired the first bell that you rang in the first place. So in this point, if you change, what they are saying is, if you change or generalize the what, the sound of the bell, what will happen is the dog cannot respond, which is the stimulus discrimination, which is the last principle of classical conditioning. Stimulus discrimination. Stimulus discrimination, they are saying the opposite of stimulus generalization. The animal is able to differentiate the bell. So stimulus discrimination, discriminating is the let go. You just forget about it. So in this case, we are saying the bell has been generalized, which means changing of the bell. The last principle is the dog will be able to do what? To differentiate, which is the stimulus discrimination. The dog will be able to differentiate the bell. These are the principles of classical conditioning. These are the principles. There are only 5. Number 1, we said it is acquisition. Number 2, we said the second principle is extinction. Number 3, we said spontaneous recovery. Number 4, we said generalized stimuli. Number 5, which is the stimulus discrimination. Are we together? So acquisition, acquire. Extinction, we are saying it can come to an end. It can come to an end. The dog can stop responding. If you stop coming, for example, with a bell, it can stop responding. And then number 3, we are saying spontaneous recovery. If you start once more ringing the bell, the dog will start responding spontaneously because it has already acquired. Number 4, we are saying generalized stimuli. If you change the bell, it will discriminate it, which is the stimulus discrimination. It will recognize to say this is not the bell that my master was using in the first place. Are we together? Okay. So we are going to go to our second theory of learning, which is no other than operant conditioning or instrumental conditioning. It was founded by this man by the name of B.F. Skinner. Operant conditioning, operant, it is coming from the word operation. Are we together? It is coming from the word operation. This type of learning is also called instrumental conditioning. It is called operant conditioning because the organism has to operate on the environment before the reward. Are we together? So the reason why it is called operant conditioning, it is because the organism, which is you and the other organisms, you have to operate on the environment for you to acquire a reward. For example, we all operate on environments for we to acquire a reward, which is maybe harvesting of maize. We have to make sure that we till the land, we operate on the land. That's when we are going to do what? To acquire the reward. So this one was founded by a man, which I said earlier on, who is no other than B.F. Skinner. So a question can come, who is the father of operant conditioning? The answer is B.F. Skinner. So it is saying B.F. Skinner is regarded as the father of operant conditioning, but his work was based on Thorndike law of effect. So his work was based on Thorndike law of effect. The key word is reward. So in this operant conditioning, the key word is the reward, because it is believed that behavior that is rewarded is more likely to occur in the same or similar situation. For example, umwana nga apasa, maybe this baby or this child has passed, you always present a reward to this child. You are encouraging what? The same behavior to continue. Are we together? So the theory is primarily drawn from Edward Thorndike, who lived from 1874 to 1949. So that's a one-word answer. We are saying Thorndike lived from 1874 to 1949. And we are saying this theory was based on the law of effect. The law of effect was founded by a man known as Edward Thorndike, who lived from 1874 to 1949. In this one, an individual learns that if some response is made, it leads to a particular consequence. An operant is an item of behavior shown by a person. If behavior brings about present or rewarding consequences, it is more likely to be repeated. Are we together? So here, hear me keenly. They are saying if a behavior brings about pleasant or rewarding, it is rewarding consequences, it is more likely to be repeated. For example, I gave every time this child is passing, and this child knows to say, if I pass, my father or my mother will reward me. So in this case, we are saying it will bring about repeated behavior. Are we together? Are we together? Okay. If here it is also saying, if on the other hand the consequences are neutral or unpleasant, then the behavior is less likely to occur, and an alternative will be found. The pleasant consequences are called reinforcer. So the things that are good, the pleasant consequences, they are called reinforcer, and the strengthening of the behavior is called reinforcement. So the reinforcer, it is the present consequences, or rather the rewards, and the strengthening of the behavior is the reinforcement. Reinforcement, what is making this child to be working hard in school? We are calling those things reinforcement. And the reward, the actual reward, we are calling them the reinforcer. Are we together? So this man believed that the best way to understand behavior is to look at the causes of an action and its consequences. Skinner believed that the best way to understand behavior is to look at the causes of an action and its consequences. So here it is taking us to the same thing, which is the best way to understand is looking at the reinforcement, the thing which is making, or the thing that is causing somebody to behave in such a way, and the consequences. The consequences are the results or the reward. Are we together? Skinner's theory of apparent conditioning was based on the work of Thorndike Edward. Remember, Thorndike is not the father. Thorndike is not the father, but B.F. Skinner is the father of this theory. But he based his theory on the law of enforcement, or the law of effect, which was done by this man by the name of Thorndike. Are we together? So Skinner's theory of operant condition was based on the work of Thorndike Edward. That's a one-way answer. It can come to say Skinner's theory of operant conditioning was based on the work of dash A, Louis Pasteur, B, Robert Koch, D, C, Thorndike. The answer is Thorndike. Are we together? So Thorndike started learning in animals using a puzzle box to propose the theory known as the law of effect. Skinner showed how positive reinforcement worked by placing a hungry rat. The box contained a lever in the side, and as the rat moved about the box, it would accidentally knock the lever. Immediately it did so, a food pellet would drop into a container next to the lever. The rats quickly learned to go straight to the lever after a few times of being put in the box. The consequences of receiving food if they pressed the lever ensured that they would repeat the action again and again. Positive reinforcement strengthens a behavior by providing a consequence an individual finds rewarding. Skinner demonstrated that animals put in a modified cage learned to press the lever when the lever pressing response was reinforced by delivering of a pallet of food. So let's explain Let's look at this puzzle box. We can see a rat inside, and this is a puzzle box. So the theories of learning, we are basically talking about things that people came up with. Remember, the first theory was the conditioning, classical conditioning. That was the first theory. It was founded by Ivan Pavlov. The second one is the operant, which was founded by B.F. Skinner and is regarded to be the father of this theory. So what I want to emphasize is, when we are talking about the theories of learning, we are basically talking about how different people from different societies came up with ideas to know how organisms, individuals, animals can learn. So they came up with these theories to make sure that, to see how people and how organisms learn. Remember classical conditioning, we said the main object was a dog. In this operant, we are going to look at the main object, which is the rat. So operant pressed this rat into this cage, and what he did was he had to make a secret switch inside. So this rat was very hungry, in a way that it was trying to come out from this cage. But whilst it was operating, remember the key point is the operating in this environment, it accidentally pressed on a lever or a switch. Hence, when it presses on the switch, the food would drop into the cage. You've seen? So it later learned to say, if I move about, I operate in this environment, which is the cage, the food pallet will definitely fall. So that's how operant conditioning is based on. Is based on an individual operating on an environment with an intention of receiving a reward. Are we together? Okay. So this is, if you've been asked to explain about this, if you are very creative, you can even draw this. You put even the mice inside the box. You will start even explaining what all this theory is all about. Okay, so we'll go to here this point. It is saying positive reinforcement strengthens a behavior by providing a consequence an individual finds rewarding. Let me come again. Positive reinforcement strengthens a behavior by providing a consequence an individual finds rewarding. So positive reinforcement strengthens an individual. So positive reinforcement, everything that is good, it encourages or it strengthens an individual to make sure that it provides a reward at the end of the day. So Skinner demonstrated that animals put in a modified cage learned to press the lever when the lever pressing response was reinforced by delivering of a pallet of food. So the mice knew to say, if I operate in this environment, definitely I've learned to say food will be rewarded if I operate in this cage. Are we together? So operant conditioning refers to increasing the probability of a response by following the occurrence of the response with reinforcement. That is a form of learning by consequences. So learning by consequences. In this case, we can also divert it to say people can learn using consequences. Consequences, these are rewards. Every time this this child is being rewarded is learning a lot, because these rewards are reinforcing the child to put even more effort so that he or she can be rewarded. So we are saying this operant conditioning, it can also provide learning by consequences or learning by reward. So every time this individual operates, this individual knows to say, okay, if in there ku school I'm operating per school, definitely I'm going to be rewarded a certificate, yes, a diploma. So it is learning by consequences, learning by a reward. Consequences in this case, they are rewards, because the mice knows to say, okay, if I'm operating in this cage, what will happen? I'm going to be rewarded. So this enforces the learning by consequences or the learning by rewards. A positive reinforcer is a rewarding stimulus that, when presented after a response, increase the frequency of response. Remember, a positive reinforcer, B.F. Skinner, this founder of this theory, said there are only two things that can make somebody learn. So he said we have a positive reinforcer. A positive reinforcer is something rewarding, something good, a reward which is good. So he said is a rewarding stimulus that, when presented after a response, increases the frequency of a response. So this reinforcer, when rewarded a good reward, will encourage a child to do what? To work even more towards receiving that reward. Are we together? So we also said a negative reinforcer. A negative reinforcer is punishment. A negative reinforcer, it's in which when somebody is a negative, something which is bad, reinforcer is a reward. So a negative reward, in this case, it is synonymous with punishment, is a stimulus that, when removed following a response, increases the electric shock and the pain. So they've just given an example. For example, when you remove the reward from the child, this child has already learned to say, every time I work hard, I'll be granted a reward. But take, for example, you remove that reward. If you remove that reward, it can encourage this child to work even more less, because this child has learned to say there is a positive reinforcer, which is a reward, a good reward. But in this case, when you remove this reward, this child, the performance also would decrease, because it is a negative reinforcer. Takwabetsuma at the end of the tunnel. Are we together? Yes. So this is all about the theory of operant, or the instrumental theory, which was founded by B.F. Skinner. Are we together? Okay. So we are going to look at the third theory, which is cognitive learning theory. So cognitive, so these things you've seen, they are very familiar. When you look at the forms of learning and the theories of learning, they are a little bit familiar. So we have to make sure that if we listen to this, we go through once more so that we can understand better. there is a difference. Forms and the theories. Theories, these are ideas which were coined by people. Forms, these are just things that can make somebody learn. Are we together? So there is a difference. So we come to our third objective, which is no other than cognitive learning. Cognitive learning, it is a situation where learning is achieved through understanding. It involves perception, organization, and knowledge. Cognitive, it is coming from the word the mind or knowledge. So cognitive learning, it involves the mind to learn. Cognitive learning emphasizes on what we cannot observe, such as thinking and memory. One of the earliest theorists of cognitive learning was Edward Tolman. So the one who founded cognitive learning, the earliest man who founded cognitive learning is no other than Edward Tolman in the year 1930s. He believed that cognitive processes play an important role in learning. He believed that behavior goal-directed and can be modified. So cognitive, he said, it's all about thinking and memorizing. Apart from that, he also said he believed that the use of cognitive processes play an important role in learning. Yes, so he also said this type of a theory plays an important role in learning. Are we together? Yes. So that's it. So we go to the organization expects particularly outcomes to follow specific behaviors. Tolman emphasized the fact that organisms learn relationships between stimuli rather than responses. Behavior is always directed towards certain goal. In a typical experiment, he worked on a rat to find out how they would learn using cognition. He put 3 groups of rats in a maze. So I would encourage somebody out there who is listening to read more about this theory. So this theory, remember, it is talking about knowledge, the use of knowledge, the use of thinking, critical thinking. That is what it is all about. So we'll go to our fourth objective, which is no other than social learning theory. Social learning theory or observation. The proponent social learning theory were Dollard and Miller in 1950. So these guys were the first ones to propose this kind of theory in 1950. Dollard and Miller. They argued that most human beings learn through observing other people. By 1960, others took this theory, and this included Albert Bandura. He did not dispute that some human learning takes place through conditioning. He believed that there was a third force, the environment. Social learning emphasizes learning through. So, he also said social learning emphasizes learning through one's environment. According to social learning, environment factors lead to behavior which can be reinforced or punished. This can lead to behavior depending on whether a person has been punished or rewarded. Observation learning is very important in all daily lives. You learn from other people's experience and your behavior. Bandura said that children learn more when they observe people they respect, like parents and teachers. So this social learning theory, which is also known as observation, it is based on having a role model, looking at what is happening in the environment. So they are also saying children learn from their respected models such as teachers and parents. It is also saying these people which are the teachers, he called them models. And so this kind of learning can also be called modeling. You've seen? It can also be called modeling. He concluded that learning by operant classical conditioning will not be sufficient for human beings. You've seen how these psychologists were arguing. This one came up with his own theory, this one came up with his own theory. But everything was based on how different organisms learn. We also have the biological theory, which is the last theory. So the biological theory, the theory focuses on the changes that occur in the nervous system of organisms involved in the learning process. It has been suggested that certain areas of the brain are evoked in language acquisition and memory. When an area of the brain concerned with memory is activated, certain memories will be evoked. Biological theory, it is basically looking at how the biological setup of an individual, how somebody is born, how somebody is made. So in this case, it is looking at the nervous system. When maybe, for example, part of the nervous system is evoked, or rather it is disturbed, learning can be also disturbed. An example given, somebody who has had maybe a traumatic